Well, g'day guys. Welcome to episode 6 of Beyond the Bite. And it's pretty much on one of my favourite fish, the old mangrove jack. Timmy stitched us up. He's actually gone up to Kinchin at the moment. He's gone up pre-fishing for ABT. So me and Mitchy are going to run the show tonight. And as I said, talking about mangrove jacks, as it says, my favourite thing. Mitchy's probably got the best average out of the office. We filmed last year one of our lures, and you know, Mitchy got a 55.
55, yeah.
And then the next time he's gone jack fishing, he's on our SXR 10.
Yeah, in gold colour. Yep.
Got another 55. So he's definitely the one with the runs on the board. But
I doubt it.
but because Mitchy's probably not as knowledgeable in the way of mangrove jacks, he's happy to step down. And we've actually got one of our pro staffers, Dan, to come in tonight. He's going to talk about mangrove jacks and how he fishes for them. He does a lot of sort of creek bashing in his kayak, all that sort of stuff. So we're looking forward to that. So we'll do the normal thing as we do on the show. We're going to go through our tackle and talk about some of our tackle tips and, you know, our favourite Rapala lures and what we like to use. So
yeah, yep, as well too. And then also going on to the trophy hunters for 2025, the mangrove jacks that have been put in, as well as the Rapala rookies as well too, with the jacks that have been entered into the Rapala rookies app as well too. So should be a really good episode with all that in there as well too. And also too, got a prize pack like we do with every episode. So it's going to have all your plastics, so some lures, a buff, shirt, cap, and all you've got to do is you're just going to be watching on Facebook and YouTube, and you've just got to comment your favourite Rapala lure or with mangrove jacks.
Yeah.
So pretty easy to win an awesome pack for mangrove jack of our Rapala products.
yeah, 100%. And obviously through the show, if whatever me and Dan or Mitchy are talking about, if you've got any questions or you have some questions yourself about mangrove jacks, make sure you jump onto Facebook and YouTube, put your questions down, and at the end of the show, one of us will try and answer the one of those questions for you. So let's start the show. Let's get into our go-to tackle. So like always with all the species that we've done throughout the year, we're pretty much just going to go through the tackle that we like to use. So I'll start it off. When it comes to rods, with mangrove jacks, I sort of still like a little bit longer rod when I'm fishing for, well, especially in open water. I'll fish that 7-foot rod, but most of the time I'm going to generally go and try and find a rod around that 6'6" to 6'10" range. We've got a lot of rods in our 13 range of rods. We've actually just released a new range of Code Red rods. There's one rod that I've been liking a lot lately, and I've actually caught quite a few fish on it, is that medium heavy. So that's probably one of the things. When it comes to rods, but for jacks, one of the things I always try to explain to people, and a lot of people get it wrong, is you do still want a bit of a fast action rod, but something that's not too powerful in the tip, because I find, and I've done a lot of jack fishing over the years, that the more powerful the rod can be, the harder the fish will go. So I still like to have a rod that's got a little bit of tip. That also helps aid in casting. So obviously mangrove jack's a lot about structure. You want to actually have a rod that's got a little bit of tip in it, so that's going to aid in your casting, so you're going to get nice accurate casts. But as I said, anything in that 10 to 17 pound range I like to use, especially on my plastics. And then obviously when I go targeting bigger mangrove jacks, if I'm fishing like big structure like bridge pylons, all that kind of stuff, that's where I'll step up to something around that 10 to 20 pound sort of size. So one of the heavy 13 rods. So that's me in the way of rods. When it comes to reels, I'm a big fan of obviously 13 bait cast reels. Probably my favourite reel to use out of the 13 lineup is a Z slide. Like, it's got so many good features with it. It's really well suited for mangrove jacks. You've obviously got that slide system on the side, which when you are chasing jacks, if you only have one or two setups, a good thing with this reel is you've obviously got that slide set up on the side of the reel that you can do micro adjustments pretty much on the fly. So just say you're casting a lightly weighted soft plastic, you want to have the magnetic thing sort of on the lighter side. But then if you start coming into a windy situation, or you've put a heavier lure on without going in, changing the magnetic spool, It's pretty much just a matter of flicking that orange bar down, and that will change the magnetic spool of it. So it'll actually slow the spool up a bit, so you're not really going to get any wind knots or anything like that. So when it comes to reels, something around that 200 size is going to get you, away with most situations. And then when it comes to spin reels, anything from that 3,000 to 5,000 size I'll use, because I'm obviously going to be fishing heavier sort of structure. So when it comes to line, you can't go past Suffix 832 when it comes to mangrove jack or barra fishing. It's just one of those lines that's got really good abrasion resistance, and obviously mangrove jacks being around that structure, that 832 is definitely one of the ones you want to look at. As far as poundage, anything in that, so 20 pound to 30 pound is pretty much what I use. Going back to what I said about heavy structure, sometimes I might bump it up to 40 pound if I'm throwing bigger baits, or I'm fishing some bridges or some areas where I know there's some big fish, and you've obviously got to put a little bit more hurt on them. So that's the way of line. And then leader, Suffix and Invisalign is pretty much the one that I use a lot. Anything, again, similar sort of size, anything in that 20 to 30 pound sort of size. And I may bump it up to 40, 50 pound if I'm fishing big lures or fishing around that heavy cover. So that's my sort of go-to tackle. Dan does obviously a little bit different fishing to me. He does a lot of estuaries, more in the estuaries, mangroves, all that sort of stuff, and he can run through his sort of setup, which he likes to use.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of similarities that I do with some of the mixed stuff, especially like the gear, tackle, all that sort of stuff. But the main thing with me, especially fishing from a kayak and in skinny creeks, my rod lengths are a little bit shorter. So if I'm throwing a spin rod, I'm sort of looking at that sort of 6.6 range,
Yep.
And a little bit lighter. It's very similar. You want a light tapered rod, nothing too crazy to be able to pull them out, because they will pull harder, especially if you're in a kayak, you'll get towed around. So sort of 3 to 5 kilo range.
Yep.
Sometimes I beef it up to 4 to 8, depending on the situation. 6'6" for the spin rod. You're looking sort of at a 2,500 to 3,000 size reel. You can usually get away with most of your spin stuff in the kayak. I reckon probably majority of the fishing though is with a bait cast setup, and I'll use the Code Red rods as well. So I use the 6 foot model, and it's a 4 to 8 kilo range, and I found that's really good for a range of different lures that I like to throw, and not just for jacks as well. There's heaps of different species like bass and that sort of thing, but we're here for jacks. And I think that sort of 6 foot range is perfect for the kayak to skip in under structure and be able to be very versatile in those really skinny situations where it's needed. In terms of the reel, I'm very similar to Mick as well. So the Concept Z slide. Yep. The difference is I'm on the left side, but I like that sort of that little slide system. It's really, really good to have on the go, especially when you're fishing one side of the bank and you need to flick over, or there's a bust up, something like that. You can just quickly adjust this, and you're not going to have any issues with backlashes or anything like that. So a really nice little compact reel. As Mick said, sort of that 200 size is probably more than enough. I spool it up also with 832, the Suffix 832. I've used that from day dot for all my species. So whether it's a small little brim all the way up to Jackson Barra, all that sort of stuff, I have no issues with it. I've got 100% trust in it. The abrasion resistance on it is really, really good. And I'm just confident when I'm skipping lures deep into structure, I know that it's not going to pull. So that's basically it for the line. And then the leaders, it's the Invisalign as well.
Yep.
I tend to use that fluoro as well. Poundage, I probably don't go less than sort of 30 pound, just because of the gnarly country that I'm fishing, and the close quarters action you're in. You've just got to pull them out and hope for the best. I have got away with 20 pound at some stages, but a good rule of thumb for me, I think, 30 pound braid and leader.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so they were our go-to setups. Now we're going to go to what Rapala and why. Cool. So basically we'll run through our Rapala lures that we like to use, and probably my number one, and one lure that I was pretty heavily involved in, I was pretty fussy on how I wanted the action of the lure, is our 4-inch heavy hitter. So this thing is like pre-production, I had heaps of samples. I caught a lot of really big fish on this lure. We spent a fair bit of time, and it was probably one of the hardest ones to get right out of the Crush City range to get the action that I wanted, the roll and all that kind of stuff. But since its inception and we've released it, it's caught a lot of mangrove jacks for me, and I think quite a lot all out there. But number one thing for me with jacks is if I'm fishing dirty water or you got heaps of cloud cover, all that kind of stuff, I can't go past that red dog colour. Like, so it's a good dark, like those darker colour lures are really good in that dirty water or low light conditions, because they probably put out the best silhouette of a lure. So number one for me, if I had to have one lure in the Rapala range and I had to catch a mangrove jack, this would be it. Would be the red dog. White bait is a pretty close second. Going back to what I said about light and water clarity, all that kind of stuff. White also is pretty good in dirty water, but white is a really good colour, especially our white bait colour. It's got a little bit of translucence to it, but it's also got a really nice glitter to it. It's really good in that clear water. Yeah. So at home, I live on the Goldie, so I do a lot of stuff around the canals on the Gold Coast. When I put on the water, the first thing, obviously I take notice of, if there's a lot of cloud cover, if the water's dirty, and that will be the decision on why I'll choose a white bait over a heavy hitter. So as far as water clarity is concerned, I'll just quickly touch on it. I'm not someone that tries to find the super clean water. I always try and find where the water starts to change colour. So in a system, I'll sort of, depending on the time of year, like this time of year, it's early season, the water's generally going to be a lot clearer up the system, so I'll fish right up the back of, say, the Nerang River, the Cooma River, some of the canals in the Jumping Pin area. I'll fish those areas, and then obviously as you get through the seasons, the water will get dirty with rain and all that kind of stuff, and then obviously you pull yourself back down the system. So that'd be my number one lure. With them, I'll just touch base. As far as jig heads, we've obviously released the VMC Gripper jig heads last year. But one thing I do, because I fish a lot of man-made structure, my thing with the heavy hitter is all about reaction. So I'm talking about speed. Like, to me, you've obviously got the action of the lure, but the speed is one of those things with the mangrove jacks. They're so fast in how they attack a lure. I believe, but you having a little bit more speed, you've got a lot more control over them. So obviously, because I have got a lot of speed, I actually fish a 5/8 jig head on our heavy hitter. So I can burn this thing really quickly, and what that does, obviously using that 5/8 jig head, especially on a pontoon situation or even a bridge pylon, obviously you want to just be below that structure. So obviously you got your pontoon, you pretty much just want to run your lure in line with the bottom of the pontoon, because generally they're going to be sitting up there out of that current flow, because it'll obviously create a bit of an air pocket underneath the pontoons. The fish will sit up high. So burning that plastic fast past the pontoon, having that heavier head doesn't bring the lure up quick in the water column. So if you cast past a pontoon or a bridge pylon, you let it sink to that desired depth, and then you can start winding, it will pretty much stay in that zone like that whole time. So that's just another tip with the heavy hitter to take note. But probably my second favourite lure, and one that probably the last couple of years I've probably caught, two of my biggest jacks I've caught in the last couple of years have been fishing our Shad Rap Elite 95. Obviously it's really heavy duty construction. You don't have to do anything with it. 3x trebles on it. She's built like a lot tougher than the original Shad Raps. This is definitely my big go-to lure when you're talking about jacks on bridge pylons. I've got a couple of really big fish on it the last couple of years, but its little brother, the 75, would probably be one that you'd probably get a few more consistent catches. You'll catch some of those sort of 40, 50 centimetre, sort of low 40 centimetre fish off the bridge pylons. When we first released this lure, I think the first time we went out and filmed it, I got 3 fish off the one bridge pylon. There's 75. So definitely, if another thing to do too, talking about the two sizes, is looking at the bait that's in the system at the time. A lot of the time, these two are fairly that's perfect size for a little potty mower.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much what these things are representing. So if you don't own a Shad Rapala and you want to go and chase a big mangrove jack on the bridge pole, and definitely go and try that 95 for sure. But probably everyone's favourite way to catch any fish is on top water.
Oh, yeah.
So my favourite top water, unfortunately, we don't do anymore, is the Skidder V. I've caught a lot of big fish on that, but we've released this precision pencil range, I think 12 months ago. So I've got the two sizes in this. Again, the bigger 107 is obviously early morning, all that kind of stuff, when you're obviously representing some of those bigger baits that get along those concrete retaining walls, any of those sort of rocky points of the canal entrances, all that kind of thing. I like to throw that bigger one. But obviously as a bit more light comes up, or as you get into the, probably say February, March, when we start getting the prawn run, so we've obviously had a bit of rain and the prawn start, downsizing to that smaller one can be the key, because you get a lot of that smaller prawn activity in that area where I sort of fish in that time of year, which is generally down in the Broadwater area. So
Yeah.
definitely another one to look at. And then another one with top waters, walk the dog style lure is obviously good when the water's, you've got a glassed out sort of time. But if you ever get any sort of, if you're in the water some mornings and you've got a little bit of chop on the water, our Skidder Pop Elite is probably the next one that I would put on if I've got a little bit of disturbance in the water, because obviously the popper produces a little bit more sound, so they can pick it up in that ripple in the water and all that kind of stuff. So they're my three types of lures that I like to use when it comes to fishing for jacks.
Cool. All right, so with my lures, as I said, I do a lot more in the natural creeks. So there's mainly plastics that I like to throw, purely because you have to be right up deep into the structure. The third one I'll talk about is a bit more exciting, but we'll start with the first one. My go-to is the Crush City 3-inch Imposter. This one here has been out for a while, and as soon as it came out on the market, I said straight away, I'm like, that's going to catch lots and lots of jacks. So in a lot of those natural creeks that I fish, there's a lot of those jelly prawns around. And when you rock up in the morning, first light, something like that, you'll see those little jelly prawns flicking in the shallows, and whether it's a brim or small jacks following it, as soon as you see that, you're going to be in for a good time with these ones. And what I like to do with these is, again, because I'm fishing natural structure, is I rig them weedless with a sort of a EWG hook, 3.0 to 4.0 size hook. We'll get away with it. And I skip them right up deep into structure. And sometimes I've actually landed them right on top of a jack's head, and they haven't spooked. They've literally just gone up and smashed it. So although it's pretty much a very small lure, it can be really, really versatile. And in those skinny creeks, you can get jacks 50 plus. On these, you just have to hold on and pray, really. It's a really, really exciting way to do it. I kind of saw it as, with the boys up north and flicking for frogs under mangrove structure and bringing them out. It's a very, very similar technique, and especially around here in southeast Queensland, as Mick said, there's prawns everywhere. And this time of year, as we progress longer, you'll just get more of those jelly prawns. So it's definitely something to have in the tackle box for that. Prawn plastics is usually what I start with. The other one that I do, sort of like what Mick was saying, is the heavy hitter. So that's the 4-inch heavy hitter. That's the white in colour, that one. Mick alluded to the colour choice depending on the clarity of water and the conditions and all that sort of stuff. I tend to go for that white bait colour or the whiting. A lot of the creeks that I fish are a little bit clearer than, say, your canals. But there'll be, obviously, when you've got a tide change or something like that, it might dirty up. So you do have to change it probably throughout the session. In terms of colour, I think getting that lure into the fish's face is more important than colour. So again, similar to the Imposter, with this guy, I like to rig it weedless as well. So anywhere from 1/4 ounce up to 5/8 ounce, 4.0 hooks. Pretty good. And I have been playing around with a new release as well from AFTA as well, which is the 375 Suspect. This is going to be really good for that when the bait's a little bit smaller. Maybe it's not so prawns or anything like that. And you want to skip this deep into structure too. Again, very similar. Rig it weightless and weedless. Sometimes you put a little bit of weight on it as well. It replicates small whiting, sort of thing as well. Again, same situation with the colours as well. And probably my third lure that I go to, as I said, I usually go for those plastics, so imposter, heavy hitter, or suspect. The one that I've been playing around with the last couple of seasons or so has actually been glide baits. So with glide baits, there's a lot of drawing power from it. It can be very intimidating throwing something. This one here is 11 centimetres, so it's not a massive glide bait at all. But when you cast it into a structure where you think it's going to, where there's a fish sitting, you actually see the fish come from a mile away. The drawing power on these things is crazy, and more people are cottoning on to the fact that glide baits work for jacks. In the natural stuff, as well as, your pontoons and that sort of thing. I've had a bit of success around the pontoons lately. The good thing about this one is that, 11 centimetres, so it's not super intimidating, not huge or anything like that. You don't need specific swim bait gear or anything like that. They've got that little weight adjustment system underneath. So I actually, when I start my sessions early morning, I'll take that weight out, and this sits just below the surface. So it's almost like you're fishing a surface lure, and it'll just glide side to side, almost like a walk dog, almost. But a bit bigger presence. And so those fish that are a bit more confident might come out and give it a crack. And then as the day progresses, if you want to fish a bit deeper, the current's running a bit harder, you want to get a bit in the fish's face, you can just add that little weight system in. So I've been playing around with that for the last, season or so. And I'm really excited to see what comes with that, because it's very addictive.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Sure. And that's just going back to what you said. The cool thing with that bait is you can actually buy aftermarket tungsten weights to go with them. So as you said, you can obviously fish it near the surface, but obviously if you want to fish a deep rock bar or something like that, we've actually got extra adjustments to put on those. So if you want to have a crack at trying to glide bait jack, it's pretty exciting. And as you said, the drawing power of a big lure, the fish generally, when it's going to come out, they're going to come out and cream it, which it's a pretty cool way to fish. So cool. So they were our Rapala lures. So now let's have a look at our heavy hitter video, and then we'll get into our tackle tips. I'd like to introduce you to Rapala's new Crush City Customs Heavy Hitter. So the heavy hitter is 4 inches long and is designed to imitate those larger bait fish profiles like mullet and herring, which those aggressive predators love to feed on. We designed this lure with maximum action. So in the design process, we added a little bit thicker tail wrist and that big paddle tail, which gives this lure a great rolling action in the water. And it's also designed to target those real aggressive species like mangrove jacks, barramundi and threadfin salmon. Heavy hitter comes in 8 fish catching colours, from your natural bait fish patterns right through to your high contrasting colours. So there's a colour in the range that's going to suit any fishing situation. We also added a bait fish scent in the lure, so there's no need to add any scent. With that rolling action, it draws a lot of fish from a fair distance, and you get those really aggressive fish to crush that bait. The heavy hitter's been made from super TPE material, which we also added some salt to it, which enhanced that big rolling action that the heavy hitter has. So if you like targeting those aggressive predators and you want a plastic with heaps of action, make sure you go and check out Rapala's Crush City Custom Heavy Hitter, because it will crush it. Cool. So, yeah, we'll get into a tackle tip. My tackle tip's not pretty much on tackle. It's more about fighting a mangrove jack. I've got a lot of mates who have done it a long time, fish for jacks. In their early days, they used to always whinge that they'd lose fish. They're pulling hooks on fish. And that's when I go back to what I was talking about with the rod. You know, they were using real fast tapered rods, really powerful off the tip, and the fish basically would just get angry straight away. So one of the things I definitely believe, I've caught a lot of them over the years, and I've learnt, especially when fighting a fish, is I look at it the same way as trying to teach a dog how to walk, like a little pup. Obviously, the harder you pull on the pup, he's going to try and go harder. Yeah. So jacks are fairly similar, especially in that initial part of the fight. Probably the number one thing to do is, and obviously when I'm going back to, I'm talking about my heavy hitter and how it's a more of a reaction thing. The biggest thing is you got to learn to have the quickest reaction time. So you want to be able to try and hit that fish as hard as you can quickly, just to turn his nose. And then once you've done that, that's when you basically let the taper of the rod take over. Don't go too crazy on the thing and fight too hard. If you do have a boat with an electric motor, that is probably another one of those tools that you need to learn to use when you fight a jack, is obviously load up on the fish, get on your electric motor, and use your electric motor to obviously steer yourself away. Obviously, there's times that's never going to happen, and it's all happened so quickly. But one thing I must say is, first of all, look at the rod that you've got, because as I said, that definitely makes a big difference. And when I told my mates this, who, if he's watching, he definitely knows the person, because he actually is a really good mangrove jack fisherman now, but he used to lose so many fish in the early days because of it. But reaction time's number one. Number two is obviously choosing that right rod. But then three is don't panic when you fight a jack. The biggest thing is, if you do go trying to panic and do all that kind of stuff, that's when everything goes wrong. So try and obviously get in that position where your boat's in that position that your electric motor's facing out when you're ready to go. So when you do hook it up, stick your rod as close to the water, if not below the water, the tip of your rod. So if you are in any sort of structure, the line's below the structure, and basically pull the fish out. In the early days, I did a lot of my early time tournament fishing. I did a lot of brim fishing, and I reckon a lot of that fighting a fish on 2-pound line, that taught me a lot about how to fight a fish. I used to fish really slow tapered rods for brim when I fished 2-pound line. The way you fight a brim, if you take that into the way you fight a mangrove jack, a lot of the times you can get those bigger fish. They don't fight as hard. They ended up coming out quite easily. So that's probably my tackle tip. Some people out there will probably disagree with me, but I think I've caught enough fish over the time to know that choosing the right rod and taking it easy on fighting a jack will definitely land you a lot more. So that's my tackle tip as far as it goes the way of mangrove jacks. But before we jump over to Dan's tackle tip, just another mention. We've got that awesome prize pack. So if you are watching on YouTube or you are watching on Facebook, jump on there, write down your favourite Rapala lure to go and catch a mangrove jack, and at the end of the show, Jess will choose someone to give that prize pack away to. So let's jump over to Dan's tackle tip now.
All right, so yeah, my tackle tip, I do have a lot of synergy with mixed stuff. You know, when you're fighting them, you do want to play them a little bit. If you go harder, they'll just pull you harder back in. But mine is around with my natural creeks, fishing in the kayak and that sort of thing. If you're throwing lures like your imposters or your suspects, heavy hitters, the smaller lures, you can get away with it. But when you're casting it in there, you obviously want to be right in the jack's face. You want to be right where they're living. You have to be very, very almost finesse about it. Jacks do have that reputation for being brutes and running into snags and running hard. But sometimes skipping your lure in there, you've got to do it very lightly. You don't really want to be, over-lobbing casts and plonking it straight in there, because they can spook very much like a brim. So that imposter is really good with that sort of, EWG, lightly weighted. You can skip it in there and it does replicate that sort of natural bait fish. The heavy hitters skipping quite nicely in there too. But my tip, especially when you're casting it, if you're using like your bait casting setup, is towards the end of the cast, even just lifting your rod tip up a little bit or feathering the reel. That'll slow that lure down and make it a little bit nicer going into the structure, because there's nothing more unnatural than something just smashing on the water. If you've ever seen brim, you drop something in the water really heavy, they all vanish. Jacks are very much the same, especially in those natural creeks. So when you're throwing things like these, bigger glides and stuff like that, even doing, casting like pitching and that sort of thing, it's a bit harder in a kayak when you're sitting down. But if you can kind of just think about the cast before you make the cast, try and get your presentation nice and still and finesse kind of into the structure, you're in with a chance. There's some days where you can just lob it in there and it'll make the biggest commotion and the jack will come out and smash it. But a lot of the times in the natural creeks and also around your pontoons and stuff like that, they can be very wary and they've seen a lot of lures. So by changing something up in terms of your technique, your casting technique might just change that bite and you'll get that fish. So I reckon that's my tackle tip for you guys if you're wanting to learn about mangrove jack. So let's head into the segment now where Mick will be running through some areas to specifically target jacks.
Cool. So in this, I'll pretty much run through some sort of scenarios, like especially in my hometown, the Gold Coast. I'll basically just run through some of the areas that I like to fish. So I'll pretty much put some slides up, and then I'll sort of run through sort of some areas on those slides to show you, areas that I look at as far as fishing that sort of structure, and then things to look at. So we'll jump across to one of my first slides, and I think it's on rock wall. So a lot of canal systems have it, even obviously normal natural banks have it, where they go and put rocks along the wall to obviously help in erosion and all that kind of stuff. But probably the biggest key is when you're fishing a rock wall, it's a great area to throw your hard bodies, so to say your shallow or running hard bodies. Something like our shad wrap is really good because it's got that square bill on it, so it's going to deflect off the rocks. But probably the biggest tip I will say when it comes to rock walls is trying to find a variance in the wall. So obviously a canal system or any estuary system, you've got tidal flow. So the biggest key is when you go into an area, you've got a rock wall, is have a look along that rock wall on low tide, especially go on there on low tide and find key parts of the rock wall. So you might find bigger sections of rock, you'll find bends in the rock wall itself, you'll have little areas where the rock wall will kick out further than others. And what you'll notice on all those sort of areas is you'll start seeing obviously the water turbulence in that kind of area. So what's that doing is not only does it disorientate the bait fish, it's a perfect ambush area for a jack to sit in. So the jack's one of those fish, they're an ambush predator. They want to sit in those areas where it sort of gets out of that current flow. So areas like that with that little bit of rock wall. If you go to the next slide, you'll see I basically just put this in. So in a canal system, obviously houses have boat ramps and stuff that go into the water. Obviously number 1 and number 2, so depending on the tide, if you've got a run-in tide or a run-out tide, the water's going to hit that area and it's going to create a little bit of disturbance and everything around those kind of areas. So obviously where the rock wall and the concrete mix meet, there's going to be a little pocket of water there. The fish are going to obviously be sitting there. So they're 2 areas to probably have your first couple of casts, like try and put your casts up in that area and work it across there. You will get a tiny little bit of eddy where the fish might be, so especially in the low light periods, they'll be right up tight on the bank. So definitely pay attention to those kind of areas. And then number 3, I just put that there because obviously that boat ramp's going to finish. Because of tidal flow, it would have created some kind of cavity underneath the boat ramp. So it's a great area for big jacks. You get a lot of like estuary cod and other big species that sit under those kind of areas as well. But definitely something to look at when it comes to like a rock wall. But as I said, going back to the original rock wall, just look for those variances in the wall because it's going to, as I said, just creates that eddy for the jacks to sit in. So next time you go look along a rock wall, definitely pay a bit of attention, and obviously you want a little bit of current on it. So that's the one thing to look for. So That's pretty much it on the rock walls. We'll jump over to the next one. So pontoons, probably at home, probably one of the things I do a lot of. So basically the reason I put this photo up, it's a low tide in this canal. It's probably one of the best times to target mangrove jacks in the canals. And the reason being, as you can see via the sand, the water would have been way up that bank. So what that does, the bait fish have obviously got a lot more water to travel in. As the tide drops, as you can see, between the pontoon and the edge of the water is a shorter period. So generally the bait fish don't have a lot of area to flow through. So number 2 and 3 would be the areas on a low tide I would target. So when I come up to a pontoon, a lot of people think, okay, I'm going to go to number 1 and throw along the front of the pontoon. Yes, a lot of fish, if you've got a big bait, will draw them out. But generally, a lot of the time, most of my fish will come off number 2 and 3, those shorter edges, where you cast into the bank, the fish will be sitting back closer to the edge of the bank. So, as I said, whichever way the tide's running, so if the tide's running in, so number 3 would be, the front of the canal, I would fish that pontoon first where the tide's hitting it, but definitely don't discard that backside of the pontoon. So number 2 and 3 would be my number 1 picks on a pontoon. Another thing in that picture, if you've got that floating jet ski pontoon, for some reason they must heat up better or something, because jacks love those jet ski pontoons or any of those plastic floating pontoons. They're definitely something that I look forward to when I go in a canal system. I see a jet ski pontoon, I'm like, he will be the number 1 thing that I'm going to throw at first. So out of that picture, so just as I said, looking at it, low tide, if you are good at casting, try and skip up the back of the pontoon, because generally a lot of the time on the bottom of the tide, the fish are going to be sitting in that back section of the thing, because as I said, the bait has a lot less water to move, and the jack is one of those things, it's an ambush predator, easy bait moving through that area. So definitely if you're good at casting, skip in underneath that dock for sure. The second one, the next slide again, is just another one on a pontoon, but obviously a rock wall style pontoon. So you got best of both worlds there. You've got a rock wall, you've got the pontoon, but again, the same scenario. 2 and 3 would be my first pick if I'm going to catch a fish, if I'm moving through the canal system. Number 1, I'll always have a cast along there, but most of the time I know that I'm going to get more of a fish off 2 and 3. But going back to what I said about the tide, as the tide's dropping down off that rock wall, number 4, if you're good enough to skip a plastic underneath the back, that's a pretty much another one of those zones where a lot of the fish will sit. Again, just another quick thing about that slide, it's obviously on a corner. So again, you've got water hitting front or back of that pontoon. That pontoon's also going to be in a little bit of an eddy as well. So that's another reason why I put that slide up. So we'll go to the next slide. Bridges. This bridge, for me, and especially like many years ago, you would have seen a lot of tantrums of me off this bridge. But one thing about bridges, they definitely produce some big fish. You know, they're a good hard piece of structure. Again, you've got current flow, all that kind of stuff. But rolling plastics or hard bodies on structure like bridges is it's a pretty good way to catch a mangrove jack. If you've got a bridge in your canal, in your system, and you want to have a crack at a jack, definitely go and try and throw a big hard body on it first, and then roll your plastic through as well. But with bridges, obviously, it looks like, particularly this bridge and probably a lot of other bridges, you've got that big main concrete structure that goes into the water, but that doesn't go all the way to the bottom. No. It'll generally have three to 5 poles that'll hold up that kind of thing. So what you want to do is try and get your timing right to get to these kind of structures where those bigger pillars are sort of just getting close to being to the, out of the water sort of thing. Yeah. Because the fish will be sitting up underneath that in amongst those pillars. So generally if I go and fish this bridge, it's going to be half tide down to low tide, or vice versa, from low tide halfway up to full tide. So with the numbers, I just put the numbers there, 1 and 2, they're the sort of outside areas of that bridge and they're quite shallow water, they would be the first 2 areas I'd go and target on that bridge. In that shallower water, I always find, especially this time of year or early or later in the season, the water will be a little bit warmer in those kind of areas early in the afternoon, or early morning, late afternoon. The water temperature's probably suited for them there. But when it comes to 3, that's where you got a lot of current. To be honest, I don't catch a lot of fish in real hard current on a bridge pylon. I generally get them on the fringes of it. So I would probably fish the first 5.5 pylons on that. Same on the other side, but I definitely would not let it go. Generally, when I fish that middle section, I get a lot of trevally and your pelagic sort of style fish in that fastest flowing water. So definitely, if you've got a bridge in the area and you want to have a crack at a jack, you never caught one before, bridges are definitely one of the ones you want to go and have a look at for sure, and throw, especially one of our Shad Rap Elite 95s. So we'll jump over to the next slide. So rock bars. Again, a lot of you'll probably hear me say it a lot, but something to do with any kind of structure. If you can go there in low tide, have a look at the actual rock structure there, or if you've got a really good sounder, you'll be able to see. But trying to find those bigger sort of rocky areas, or something that's got a little bit something different along that rock bar that creates a bigger eddy or something a bit more dominant in that area for the fish to sit on, sort of thing. So when you've got the current running in or out, looking for those kind of areas and paying a lot of attention to them. A good thing with rock bars, they hold a lot of bait fish. So another good thing is to roll those hard bodies along it. The key with a rock bar is actually hitting bottom. Yeah. You really want your lure touching the bottom, and that diversion when they do hit certain rocks or big rocks is like a trigger for a mangrove jack. So Dan touched before on with the worm hook sort of thing. So if you want to fish a real heavy, rock bar that's got a lot of rock, you're going to snag up a standard VMC jig head. Try a worm hook, like a weighted worm hook or something like that. Then you can roll it through the structure a lot easier. So again, as I said, one thing to just look for a dominant part of that rock bar, or a little deeper channel in it or something like that for where the fish are going to be sitting. So that's pretty much it for the rock bars. Go to the next slide. Mangroves. I was going to have a chat about this, but the man beside me probably knows a bit more about than me. He does a lot more of this sort of stuff. I do a little bit of it, but I'll let Dan delve into the natural stuff a bit more than me. So we'll jump over to the next slide. Again, it's a bit of a natural structure, but the only reason I put this up was more so just a couple of things to look for when you do go along an area. So I think this might have been down the Tweed or something like that, but I basically just put this up. So you've obviously got the bigger timber that's on the bank that you can actually visually see. Anything that's in the water, again, it's when it comes to current or flow, anything that's hitting that structure is going to create some kind of eddy for the jack to be sitting in. Obviously target those big structures that you can see on top of the water. But another thing to look at, and why I put that picture up, is as you can see, you've got a lot of dense timber down the bottom end, bit of green, all that greenery. But then where number 2 is, you've obviously got a cleared part of the bank. So generally what that means is there's been a bit of erosion and that bank's collapsed. So that means it's going to be out in the water somewhere. So generally that will have structure out there, and you're going to get a lot. That's where a lot of bait will sit out in that deeper water. If you've got a really clear sky, obviously the fish will come out and sit a bit deeper in the water. So if you've got really good electronics, you'll pick up that kind of stuff. But if you don't, if you go along a bank and you see that kind of stuff, generally that bank erosion is going to be out, not far off the bank, somewhere out there. So that's one reason why I put it up. I remember years ago, a lot of guys that when mangrove jacks become really popular, there was Keith Stratford used to fish up the Caboolture River, and that was one of the things that he used to do a lot of. And I learned a lot of Keith from doing that. So if you do fish a lot of natural structure, definitely look for that kind of stuff along the bank, because it's definitely a place where it'll hold bait fish. And obviously, if you've got bait around, obviously predators like mangrove jack are going to be there. So So yeah, now that's my sort of things on some of the structure and stuff as far as mangrove jacks. And let's move into our trophy hunters and rookies update. But first, let's have a look at a video on our new Code Red rods. Introducing the all-new 13 Fishing Code Red series, a bold new lineup built from the ground up for the serious lure fisho. Each Code Red rod is built on a 24-ton blank, lightweight, powerful and incredibly responsive. Fitted with premium Fuji componentry throughout, the Fuji reel seats provide a rock-solid connection between rod and reel, while the Fuji Fazlite guides deliver a smooth control casting and long-term durability, even in harsh saltwater conditions. The Code Red rod covers every corner of inshore fishing. The spin range features models from light 1 to 3 kilos, ideal for flicking small plastics and hard bodies for trout, brim and other finesse species, all the way through to a heavier 6 to 12 kilo option built for barra, snapper, mangrove jacks and tuna offshore. The bait cast range brings speed and accuracy to tight cover fishing. Fast tapers, crisp recovery and plenty of low end grunt make them perfect for pitching into snags, across drop-offs or punching soft plastic and hard bodies around structure. And for those who live for the adventure, the Code Red Travel Series has you covered. Available in both spin and bait cast models, the 4-piece model breaks down neatly into a compact hard travel case, ready to throw in the car, the boat, or even in the overhead locker. No compromise on performance, just freedom to fish anywhere. From the blank to the guides, every detail of the Code Red is about balance, feel, and confidence. Designed to perform, built to last, and ready for anything that bites back. So make sure you head down to your local 13 Fishing stockist and go and check out the extensive range of Code Red rods from 13 Fishing.
This is Mitch's Rapala rookie wrap-up, and as this episode is all about Mangrove Jack, let's have a look at this year's Mangrove Jack entries in the Rapala Rookies app. So far this year, we've had 18 entries for the rookies. The most popular lures that have been used on the Mangrove Jacks have been the Crush Shitty 3-inch Imposter with 5 catches with the colours of Chartreuse Yabby, Yabby and Motorall UV. The Crush Shitty 2.75-inch Suspect with 5 catches with the colours of Baitfish, Whiting, Neon Pearl and Motorall UV. And the Crush Shitty 3-inch and 4-inch Heavy Hitter with 5 catches as well with the colours of Black Gold, Glow Shad, White Bait, Whiting and Real Shad. Again, the soft plastics are a top pick amongst the rookies. With less than 1 month to go until we crown the Rapala Rookies of the Year, we still have a very close race. It is still anyone's game. Who do you think is going to take it out? So competition ends on the 12th of December, so there's still plenty of time to upload your fish into the app, and make sure you stay tuned for our next episode when we reveal the winner of this year's Rapala Rookie of the Year. As this show is all about Mangrove Jack, let's have a look at some of the trophy-sized Mangrove Jack that have been entered and uploaded into the Trophy Hunter app in 2025. Leading the race so far is Mick Horn with a 55cm Jack on a prototype lure. Mick unfortunately isn't eligible for this category prize, so the current leader from the public is Ben Barker with a 51cm Jack on our Crush Shitty 4.5-inch Imposter in purple haze colour. Followed closely by Lee Edwards with a 50cm Jack on the Crush Shitty Heavy Hitter in Red Dog, and Liam McKay with a 50cm Jack on a Crush Shitty Heavy Hitter in Glow Shad. With only a few weeks left to go until we announce the Mangrove Jack winner of the year, there's still plenty of time to take the lead. So if you haven't already, make sure you go download the Rapala Trophy Hunters app, download it on your phone and go enter your fish to be in the chance to win.
Cool. So just another reminder about that prize pack. As I said, jump on to Facebook and YouTube. Tell us your favourite Rapala lure to catch a mangrove jack. And as I said, at the end of the show, Jess will pick a winner on what she thinks will be lucky enough to win that prize pack. Also, if you've got any questions or anything about what we've spoken about, don't forget to chuck some questions down there. We'll answer them at the end of the show. So, so stay tuned, and we'll announce that winner at the end of the show. So we'll go from there.
Alrighty guys, so sort of similar things. There's some parts of what Mick was saying, especially around the pontoons, bridge pylons and all that sort of stuff, that I like to incorporate a lot with my natural sort of creeks and stuff like that. If you're not aware, I do a lot of stuff from the kayak. So a lot of these creeks are very, very skinny, so very, I'm talking 5-10 metres wide.
Yep.
You can barely get a boat into.
Yep.
They're the creeks that I love to spend a lot of time in. You're away from people, you're in nature, there's all birds, wildlife, all that sort of stuff. And then it's all nice and peaceful and quiet, and then all of a sudden a jack's on. And you can get all sorts of different species up those too. So I find a real sense of adventure in those ones. So I'll talk about sort of the structures that I like to fish, and I've got a couple of maps as well that I'll run through on spots that I'd probably pick apart first. And as I progress up the creek with the kayak, because with the kayak, you don't have the luxury of going from point A to point B within a couple of minutes. You have to either float up with the tide, pedal up with the tide, position yourself along it to get your best chance and, get those high percentage areas where it's possible. So we'll go to the first sort of slide. So this is a couple of maps of some skinny creeks. Everyone's probably going to try on Google Maps and try and find where this spot is. But this is an example of like a creek that I would fish. So I spend a lot of time on Google Maps and all the other places like Queensland Globe and that sort of thing to look at, where the main channels are, where you've got sandbars, structure. Sometimes you can pick up those really big fallen laydowns. But the best thing to do, kind of what Mick said before, is to go on a low tide and figure out where the structures are sitting in the certain spots of the creek. Most of the time in these sort of skinny creeks, I am actually fishing the top of the tide. I don't like a massive, massive tide around those big moons, because what happens is that water gets pushed up right up into the mangroves, and that's where the fish are. They follow the bait and it goes right up in there, and it's very, very hard. You can sometimes cast it in there if you're in a kayak. You can park yourself up and get right up in there, but a lot of the time it's impossible to get into those spots. So a neat tide's good on those top of the tides. So with this particular creek, if I was fishing it in the morning, I like to go early morning, late afternoon. Number one at the top there, it's actually a sandbar on that side. So if you've actually got incoming tide or top of the tide, jacks move around a fair bit, very much like a brim. I figured that out when I'm fishing in the kayak. So brim love to go up and down with the tide, around pontoons, all that sort of stuff. And a lot of the time jacks will be sitting with them. I find with these natural skinny creeks, a lot of these spots are missed. So these spots are not fished a whole lot. A lot of people, what they would do is come to that other side where there's that deeper channel, which you might have those bigger structures, rock bars, snags, timber structure, all that sort of stuff. But I'd actually fish that shallow side if you've got a perfect tide. So top of the tide start at the end of the run in, or the start of the run out, somewhere around there. So that's definitely one spot to look. And as I said, because it's a skinny creek, it's only 5 to 10 metres wide. So if it's not actually happening on that side, it's quite easy for you to just turn around to the other side and fish the deeper structure as well. So fishing those plastics, so whether it's the heavy hitter or the imposter, depending on your bait source, what you're wanting to throw at that time of day. Number two on that map as well, very similar. So you've got that sort of sandbar, that exposed sandbar. I'd be probably floating up with the tide and peppering all the little nooks and crannies on that side, as well as the deeper side as well. But you've also got that sort of swing that goes into that smaller feeder arm. So sometimes you'll have a little bit of a deeper section there, maybe a bit of structure, a fallen snag, rocks, something like that. So it's definitely worth having a look at that. And it's a bit of a Y intersection there. So even on that far side, down on the southern side there, you might find a bit of structure there, and it's where the bait congregates depending on the tide. So as I said, try to go at a low tide or fish at different tides of the tide. That way you can figure out which way the bait's moving, where it sits at particular spots, and the jack shouldn't be too far behind. Number 3, as the sort of session progresses with me, I'd be pushing right up into that skinny stuff. Some people turn around, halfway up it if there's not a whole lot going, but you can actually have some cracker sessions in that really skinny stuff right at the back. And maybe for only an hour or two of the tide, it's got water in it. The other part of it, it's gone. The tide on the low tide's gone. So don't be discouraged if there's no water there at a low tide. The jacks move around a fair bit in these little natural creeks. So, and then number 4 there, that's a deeper bend. Again, I'd probably fish that shallow side if there's a bit of structure there. I think it's about getting that lure into the structure and just giving yourself the best chance. There's no point in just going to one snag and saying there's no fish here. You just got to fish everything as you're moving up, especially in a kayak. So we'll go to the next one. Similar thing, so probably 1 and 2 is very similar to what I said in the other map. You want to be pushing right up those little skinny creeks, and there's a lot of little feeder arms too, so sometimes you can't get the kayak in there. You have to do a bit of bush bashing. So I actually take a little saw with me sometimes, and I'll actually cut a little bit of a tree away to try and get around it, and sometimes it pays off. So I'd be going to those ones, if you're working your way up the creek and you get up to that with the top of the tide. That number 3 there, that's a pretty big swing there. So you've got a couple of deeper bends and you will have some shallow sections as well. They're really, really good spots to just give a working over. But again, as I said, you want to be going at a low tide or at different types of the tide because they will move around in different spots depending on the conditions. And number 4 there, that's probably a spot that's probably missed by a lot of people, especially in a boat or something like that. On the top of the tide, you might only have, a foot or 2, but the jacks will actually get up into that structure, and you can actually see them sometimes with their fins sticking out and their dorsal fin. And in a kayak, it's great because you can get really, really shallow, nice in that draft, and sometimes they're sitting there. So sometimes it pays off to fish those sort of structures too. So let's go to the next one. So yeah, this is some examples of that sort of structure that you'd be seeing in those natural creeks. So top left, that would be your mangrove shoots at a sort of a top of the tide. So I think this was sort of an hour before the high tide, a neap tide as well. So there's enough structure there. You can see there's a little bit of shadows there. And that's where I'd be skipping things like your imposter, your heavy hitters, those weedless plastics deep into the structure. And you almost want to be getting it up onto the bank there too sometimes, because if you're not in the fish's face, you might as well not be there. If it's a matter of, a couple of centimetres, even a foot, if you're a foot out, there's no point. The jacks are not going to come out. Top right, that's another creek that I love to fish all the time. This one here, it's a bit of a different, it is mangroves, but it doesn't have those sort of eumatophores that you see in that bottom left one. It's actually more of a shadow corridor. So as that tide's filling up, you can imagine that's almost like a little highway, little dark highway that the jacks will sit in and follow the bait, and the bait feels comfortable pushed up right up against that edge. So that's definitely worth a spot. It doesn't look too much structure or anything like that, and a lot of people would go to the other side where there's a big rock bar or a log or something like that. So it's definitely worth, skipping something like your little finesse imposter in there. If you see jelly prawns, and sometimes you'll see them spray, you'd be surprised what's in that. And that obviously that bottom right picture there, that's one of a jack from earlier this year. And that's a skinny creek, so you can see there in the background, if you look past the jack, that's probably no more than 5 metres wide. And it's that similar scenario that I was just talking about with those maps. So I was actually fishing that left-hand side where there's a little bit of the shadow. They're very light sensitive, I find, as well. So you can definitely get them on that exposed open side, but that dark side, although it might be only shallow, you've got fish patrolling up there and bait patrolling up there. So that fish, was in mid-40s fish, so nothing crazy, but he was sitting in there in a 5 metre creek, not very wide at all. So some people would turn around by that point, but luckily with the kayak, you can just float up with the tide and get up past in these little spots. So that's probably it for those little skinny creeks. We'll go to the next one. This is an example of what I was saying about going on a low tide. So this is one of the creeks that I fish a bit as well. And you can see that's a Queensland globe map on the left-hand side there. And there is actually no water in the mouth there at all. So with a boat, you've got Buckley's chance of getting in there. You might if you're pretty keen, but with a kayak, obviously you can just pick it up and go through. Some people are discouraged by those sort of spots. It looks like it very much on the right-hand side, but that's one of my favourite creeks for fishing jacks as well. And sometimes on a low tide, that's what it looks like. And you'll only have these really, really small little channels where it sits. But as that tide's filling in, that's why I like that higher tide, fishing in those mangroves, in those shallows, getting it deep into the structure, you can be in for a good time. A lot of those spots are missed by people, but yeah, that's more of an example of what I look for on Google Maps and that sort of thing. And, don't ever be discouraged by a creek that looks like that. You can definitely be in with a chance, that's for sure. We'll go to the next one. So this is more looking at, your low tide situations. So again, I'd probably fish this creek as well on a high tide, but if you've got the conditions, we can't pick the right conditions. We have to go with what Mother Nature wants. All these spots are really, really good little locations to just put a cast in and see how it goes. So this is a bit of a deeper creek, and when I'm talking deeper, I'm saying 2 to 3 meters at max. So that's deep for me. I'm fishing in a meter and a half sort of thing. So 1 and 2, pretty similar. You would probably have your bigger structures like Mick kind of mentioned, so your fallen timber, rock bars, all that sort of stuff. You want to be sort of fishing those structures and just putting more and more casts in and just hoping and increasing your chances of coming into contact with a jack. Number 1 was a good spot. If you've got an incoming tide, that first little bend where you've got that sort of point of difference, where you've got that bait pushing through or the tide pushing through, usually the first couple of snags you want to be peppering those to all buggery because that's where your bait's going to be sitting and hopefully some predatory fish like jacks. 2 is very similar. You've got a deeper wide bend. I'd also be fishing that shallow section, again, depending on the tide. If it's a high tide, yeah, absolutely. Low tide, there's going to be no water there. So 3 is similar. It's got that sort of bend on the other side, on that northern side, but it's also got a little feeder arm just further up the creek as well. So they're really good ambush spots as well for jacks to sit as the bait pushes in. And sometimes as well with Southeast Queensland especially, we're having a lot of rain lately, so you'll get a lot of fresh coming down and then you'll get those prawns coming through too. So that's when that imposter comes in handy as well. You'll see them flicking in the shallows and that sort of thing, and that's when you just know you got to throw that imposter in there. And if there's a jack there, they're not going to hesitate to hit it, that's for sure. And yeah, sort of 5, very similar to 3, another feeder arm. Again, it's got that, there's a subtle difference in that spot with number 5. The southern bank there, it's actually pointing out just a little bit, juts out a little bit. That's always another promising spot to even fish from a kayak or a boat. Those points of difference. You just got to be looking for those things, just keeping an eye out. And 4 is very similar with a little feeder creek there. Again, I'd be getting the kayak up in there if I can. Might have to chop a few trees down if there are some that are overhanging, but if there's a tree overhanging and you can get around it, most people are not going to be fishing it. So with a kayak, you've got to try and increase your chances of coming into contact with these fish. So we'll go to the next one. And very, very similar. Probably number 1 and number 2 is very similar to what I said before. The point of difference here is probably 3 and 4. So 3, it's actually a very shallow channel there. So at the top of the tide on a run out, you'll probably get bait running through there too. So it's always worth a shot, especially in a kayak, you can get up in there. It's a spot that's missed by your boats and that sort of thing, because your boat would probably go to that bank on the other side, which is a bit deeper. Yes, you'll still get them there in a kayak, but it's always worth just having another cast in spot number 3 there. And number 4 is very similar. It's a very shallow sort of channel there, but bait moves through there with an outgoing or incoming tide depending on the situation. So yeah, that's it for those maps. And I think, this is more the structure, what I'm looking for. Big laydowns, rock bars. So that one at the top left, I'd be fishing, there's a big shadow line there too, so I'd be making sure you get your cast right up onto the edge of the bank. Again, making sure that lure is nice and shallow and nice and light going in. You've got your logs and your overhangs as well. My first cast would probably be at the base of those trees, nice and close. And the good thing about running sort of a weedless presentation is that you're not going to get hung up. But my big thing I would say is that you want to be getting hung up. If you're not getting hung up, you're probably not close enough. There's a lot of times even in the kayak where you'll be getting snagged and you need to pull it out. If you're not getting regularly snagged on an EWG, you're probably not close enough. Yep. And that bottom right one is actually another spot that I probably, have a good cast in. It's probably a spot that's overlooked by most people, but it's actually a deep sort of mangrove ledge. So on a low tide, I don't have a low tide picture of it, but basically there's another metre or so of water and it's a straight drop and it's very, very deep in there. The fish will tuck up in there as the sun's coming up and you can see it's nice and dark in there, so they feel comfortable, that's for sure. So yeah, that's probably basically what I look for in natural creeks, but it's very, very fun in the kayaks, that's for sure. You can get away from people and you can get some fish that don't see many lures. Yeah,
100%. And it's a similar scenario with what I was talking about with man-made structure, Dan, what he went through. A lot of it comes down to slight little variances in the bank or in the current flow, all that kind of stuff. So whether it's natural or man-made structure, that's definitely some of the keys to look out for when targeting a jack. So. So yeah, if you have any questions, please send them through, and we'll try and get them answered at the end of the show. So.
Cool.
Cool. Oh.
Here we go.
Favourite lures for skip casting. So
okay.
you'll probably be the one to do that.
Yep. So as I kind of mentioned, my favourite lures, that one would probably be the Imposter. It's caught, I reckon, over the last, how many years has this been out for? 3 years now, 2-3 years now, something like that. Since its release, it's caught the majority of my fish all year long, not just jacks, but if I'm doing bass as well, I'll skip cast that deep as well. It's a really, really good lure, and when you do it with an EWG and very, very lightly weighted, it just skips very, very easily. Yep. I would say though, I would do it on spin. You're going to have a bit of a hard time doing it on bait casting. I have done it on BFS stuff, but BFS and jacks don't mix. Yeah. So I'd be definitely running your spin. You've got a lot more control with that. Yep. That would be my favourite, or your heavy hitter.
I was going to say heavy hitter. Yeah. I've just done the bass rounds down the Clarence and Richmond, and that was probably my go-to lure chasing the bass. Good thing with the heavy hitter, whether it be the 3 or 4 inch on a paddle tail, it's got a really good blooping action. So you do skip it in, you can sort of burn it out. It actually's got quite a really good sound. It sounds a bit like it's like a plopper sort of sound. So that'd be my, if I was going to go and skip cast, it'd be my old faithful heavy hitter for sure.
Yep.
Okay, using live sonar beneficial when fishing around pontoons and bridge pylons? Yes and no. Probably more so just finding bait, I reckon, more than anything, because I think, there is a handful of people that may be able to tell the difference between a brim and a jack, but a lot of the times you definitely can see fish under the structure, but it's probably a really good tool for finding bait as well. So if you're moving around an area, you may find a particular area has got a lot more bait in it, or particular pontoons in a canal system might have more bait in it. I would use it in that regard. But as far as picking out a jack in a brim under a pontoon or a piece of structure, I think it's too hard, to be honest. I
don't have much input with that. I go bare bones in my kayak. And
they definitely, sounders definitely help with finding structure and all that kind of stuff, and as I said, finding bait, but there's nothing better than going jack fishing without any technology, and you don't know when the next hit is, because they come from nowhere. I've done a lot of it over the time, and I've spent many donut days in the water, like probably everyone has, but those days when you've done 1,000 casts of the day, and then all of a sudden one creams you, that's sometimes better than looking at live sonar for a jack anyway. Other species may not, but does sunlight affect mangrove jack setup on structure? Yes, it definitely would. Dan's touched on a lot, especially in the natural stuff. You obviously try and find those shaded pockets and all that kind of stuff. So I would say a similar thing on man-made structure. Jacks, like a lot of fish, light sensitive, all that kind of stuff. They're going to be sitting in that darker sort of areas of the water on that sort of structure. Again, it's probably it's obviously a little bit darker thing that they probably feel more comfortable in that kind of area as well. So definitely does play a big thing in the way of finding those areas that have some kind of shade or some kind of a difference in light in the water sort of thing. So.
I agree as well, especially with those natural creeks. As I said, I like to fish early morning, late afternoon. That's when it's that sort of low light period, sunrise, light, dark light. They tend to roam around a little bit early morning, late afternoon, that sort of thing, a bit more active. As that day progresses, you have to get that deeper into the structure. And I suppose with pontoons and stuff that I've done as well, throughout the day, you'll still get hits all throughout the day, whereas with your natural creeks, you want to find those deeper, darker spots. So, yes, I would say it definitely affects the way they sit on structure. They look for that dark spot. They're light sensitive. You just need to kind of adjust your approach as the day progresses and that sort of thing. Don't keep throwing the same thing, because if you keep throwing the same thing and not getting a different result, then you're just wasting your time.
100%. Is there a good moon phase for chasing mangrove jack? Yes and no. Like Dan said, some people don't have the privilege of going fishing around certain times. I'm probably lucky enough I get to, but as a general rule, most people don't get that chance. But if I had to choose a part of the moon phase, it'd be a lead up to one of the moons. Not right on them. I don't like really big tides like you touched on. You like those little bit smaller tides. But yeah, any of those couple of days or a week leading up to the fall, a week leading up to the new. I used to really like the new moon, like leading up to the new moon. Hate the days of the new moon and full moon. But as far as moon phase is concerned, I would definitely say the lead ups and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if someone's put a question there about tides, but tides would be Dan's probably the opposite to me in that natural stuff. He likes to go fish. You were saying you like to fish sort of like the top part of the tide. Me, in the type of structure that I fish, I probably generally fish the last half of the tide. You know, so the last to the run out tide. Mine's purely about bait, where the bait's going to be. As they're going some of those pictures I showed you earlier with pontoons and stuff like that. I really like targeting those pontoons that have got about that much water in them on one edge. There's basically the sands all the way to them. You'd be surprised how many big mangrove jacks sit in that much water. As far as like moon phases and I just touching a little bit on tides, I'm probably more on the bottom half of the tide, whereas you like to probably go up. But as you know, you said a lot of good points about those little shallow sides. A lot of those fish, like a lot of other fish species, those shallow flats are basically they're there to feed. They move up on that area to feed. So that's probably why your areas that high tides are a really good area.
Yeah, I agree, and I think just going back to that moon phase thing, I definitely like that. Same with Mick. I don't like a full moon or a new moon like on it. The week leading up to it, maybe I prefer the full moon, but at the same time, I think it's about just getting out there and just putting casts in and more, because you're going to get donuts. That's just a part of the fishing, and some people get disheartened with jack fishing. With lure fishing, it took me a few seasons to get my first one, and just trying to figure these things out. I don't think you really need to worry about the moon phase. If you can get out, go. That's the main thing. I've got like a little diary that I've written down all my jacks from the years. I think I caught some on a full moon, some on a new moon, and then nothing in between. It's all varying. So I think, the tide's more important. Light's probably a bit more important, bait, all that sort of stuff before you think about moon phase. I think you just got to get out there.
Why do you think mangrove jack grow so big in southeast Queensland compared to northern river systems? I think the biggest thing is we don't really have close reefs like offshore. Basically, the way I look at it, we've got a lot of upside down reefs in our systems. Your pontoons or your man-made structure. But I think the biggest thing is down here, our reef systems are not as big as the ones up in North Queensland, all that kind of stuff. A lot of their reefs are fairly close to the river mouths, whereas ours, there's, even say off the Gold Coast, even, like our 12, 18 fathom reefs, they're not that far off the coast, but they're not like a big dominant reef for a jack to go in. Down the Tweed's probably a little bit different, but the reason I think that would be more so as far as the reefs aren't as close.
I think the other thing as well, which actually ties into a lot of the fishing that I do from the kayak and stuff, is down here and Sunny Coast, Brisbane, and in the Gold Coast, we have a lot more landlocked lakes. So those bigger fish, they sometimes get stuck in there and then they can't get out. And sometimes they just love it in there. It's full of bait, full of life. And a lot of the fish that people are catching, whether it's artificial or bait, there's those 60, 75 centimetre fish. They are from a landlocked lake or one of those places where they can't get out. And maybe up north, there might be the occasional one. And I have seen, a couple of people get those massive, massive jacks, and they're probably in a landlocked lake too, or the duck ponds, all those sorts of things. But I definitely think that reef plays a big part as well.
What's another second last question is, what's a good water temp to target mangrove jacks? Well, me locally, I would probably, when you start getting into that springtime, when your water temperature starts getting around that 24 to 26 degrees, that's when I get excited. That for me, 26 degrees is a really good temperature. At the moment, we're probably around that 28 degrees at home. I really like between that sort of period. That temperature is, for me, especially as a lure fisherman, that's the sort of water temperature I really like. When you start getting up in that 30 degrees temperature and above, it gets quite hard for lure fishers, especially during the day. Generally, you'll see because I obviously follow a lot of social media because I like me mangrove jacks, you generally find when that water temperature starts getting up in that 30 degree, a lot of the bait fishing guys do really well.
Yeah.
And you'll generally find a lot of those fish get caught at night time too. So
Yep.
as far as water temp for me, when that water temperature gets around that 24 degrees, I get excited about mangrove jacks.
Yep.
Up until about sort of now 29 degrees, I'm keen on that sort of water temperature. It's more comfortable to fish in as well.
Yep. I agree. I reckon, so like for my fishing, I try to go year round and I keep an eye on that temperature, especially from a kayak it's a bit trickier, but that's the main reason I take the fish finder. I actually don't use it really much for structure. I'm looking for that water temp, looking for those pockets of warm water or cool water, depending on the time of year and stuff. But I sort of think, 22, 23, 24, that's when I get very excited. A lot of my kayak stuff, especially those really skinny creeks, they will heat up a lot quicker than, say, your main river system. So that image that I had earlier with that little creek with all the sandbars, if that's exposed for most of the day, that sand's going to be hot. And as that tide pushes in, that water temp's probably going to be a bit warmer than that main river. So that's something to keep in mind. But I think, definitely sort of 22 to 24 is probably what I go. And then, as the season progresses and you get up to 30, it's probably a bit trickier. And that's when my early morning sessions come in clutch. I need to be in there early because that water temp's probably a bit cool from the night before, and by about 9, 10 o'clock, it's going to be very stinking. And then sitting in a kayak in 30, 35 degree temperature is not great. You can't escape it, unfortunately. So early morning is probably a good tactic too.
Cool. And the last question: where to target mangrove jack after heavy rainfall? Well, pretty much you need to do it straight away. I think. Like. When we do get that really heavy rainfall, you want to go and hit those sort of drains, like all those big drains that, as you were talking about before, some of those landlocked lakes, obviously canal systems or anything like that where you've got like if it's a natural big sort of lake or something like that that drains into the main river, you really want to be on it straight away when that rain event's happened. You want to try and do it within pretty much 24 hours because once that black water starts coming out of those kind of areas, the fish generally will go deep. Obviously that fresh water will be heavier, it'll be up in the water column, so the saltier water is going to be down low. So then after a couple of days, you're generally going to be going looking for your deep rock bars and your deep sort of water hole, or deep holes. But if you ever do get a really heavy rainfall and you've got any kind of drain system or like big drains or any natural river that runs into a main river, you pretty much want to be there when that event's happening.
I agree. Especially those natural creeks, those really shallow creeks, they will dirty up very quick. If there is heavy rainfall, I'll go to the landlocked lakes, look for your drains, your bigger structures, that sort of thing. And you need to hit it quick because I reckon sort of even 24 to 48 hours after it, it's just, it's disgusting. The water's dirty. They sit deep, and as I said, I like to fish, a metre, no more than sort of 3 metres. So I tend to struggle in those natural creeks. But as soon as it starts to clear up, you can start heading back up into those creeks. So it does affect them a fair bit, moves them around a fair bit, I think.
Yeah, cool. So basically we'll go to our prize pack winner. And our prize pack winner is from YouTube. Arthur Cook, congrats mate. Your favourite lure to target mangrove jack was a 2.5-inch creeper in motor oil. As perfect little bait for when that prawn, obviously when we've had that rainfall and we get a lot of that smaller prawns. Like for me, as I said, going into that February-March period on the Gold Coast, we get all that prawn run. A little lure like that can be dynamite sometimes, as the old saying, elephant eat peanuts, and like big jacks will eat a little tiny 2.5-inch creeper. So well done, Arthur. Mate, if you want to send our marketing team a private message, mate, we'll get your details off them and get that prize pack sent out to you. So well done, mate. So that's it for the show. Mitchie's sort of sat over on the side. He's supposed to come in for the end, but he's pulled the pin. So thanks everyone for watching. Hopefully you've learnt something from me and Dan. Dan's obviously I've actually picked up a little bit of stuff from Dan. That's the funny thing with fishing is you can never learn enough. You've got to be a sponge and take everything. So thanks Dan for coming on, mate. You've done a good job. And
thanks for having me.
So anyway, everyone, thanks for tuning in. Episode 6. Our next episode next month. Timmy's back from his Barra tour, so he can't get out of this one. And I think we're going to talk about stuff, maybe about Crush City. We're going to talk about some secrets and just basically how Crush City's evolved and helped Rapala as a brand. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. Catch you next time.
Thanks, guys.